Hi. So I've noticed a trend on college campuses and in the wider culture of judging historical figures quite harshly while ignoring their achievements, whether it's knocking down statues, renaming buildings, the perennial call to rename Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day, or attacking the Founding Fathers as slaveholders. What can a young person, a young student of objectivism on college campuses do to objectively evaluate these historical figures?
Well, I think what you really should say about the Founding Fathers, if you're particularly going to focus on that, you have to categorically say that their achievement was to make slavery untenable in the long run. They lived in a world where slavery was everywhere. It's not that they somehow introduced slavery and the rest of the world rejected it.
The Pope had slaves at that time.
Every country had slaves, and what the Founding Fathers did was make a beachhead, more than a beachhead, make a principled statement of what is required in order for people to be free, including ultimately the black slaves. Without the principle of freedom, not only the blacks would be enslaved, everybody would be enslaved to a greater or lesser extent. So it's ridiculous to blame slavery on the Founding Fathers when they lived in a time when slavery was universally accepted, and they were revolutionary in saying, no, individuals have a right to be free. And eventually that came to spread even to the blacks who were slaves. But without that initial revolution, it wouldn't have happened. And the only thing you can say about them is that you wish they had done it more quickly. But that's unrealistic. That's kind of absurd in their context to given their achievement, to say they freed us. Well, they didn't free everybody. They freed only almost everybody, and they failed to free everybody. Well, eventually they made it possible for everybody to be freed.
You can evaluate. I think you have to draw a distinction between evaluating particular actions and evaluating a person's character. And in both of them, you have to distinguish what's essential from the rest. And the rest is still real. But so it might be that for some slaveholders at some time, where they were in history and what they knew, I'm not sure if this is true of any slaveholders ever, but maybe, was such that they couldn't have grasped that it was wrong. And you just have to say he couldn't have known that he was a creature of his time, he couldn't have done any better. I don't think that was true of most of the American founders who owned slaves. I think they could have known to do better with them. I think Jefferson could have done more in his personal life, and I think he deserves some blame for that. I'm sure there were lots of other things in his life he deserves some blame for. And most people deserve some blame for things in their life. But if you're going to think about, but this is a big one, right? He knew all men were created equal, but he owned other men, and he didn't live up to it. And that's important, and it should not be like something we airbrush out of history. But there were thousands and thousands of people who did the same wrong thing he did. And no one in all of human history up until that point who did the right thing that he did. If he had stopped owning slaves, it would have made no difference, really. It would have been better for him. And it would have been, but it wouldn't have, the slaves would have been bought by someone else, recaptured. It would not have changed the course of history if he hadn't done the good things he did, but didn't do the bad things he did. But the good things he did change the course of human history. And that's what's essential. That's what is an important thing to know about him that separates him out from everyone else. If you're going to understand why is this a person worthy of studying, it's because he did this unusual thing, and this unusual thing was great. And because of that, he deserves to be viewed as great and as an important, positive figure in our history, even if he did some things that weren't just a little bit wrong, but were seriously enough wrong that we have to make a footnote to him to say also he was a slave owner. And I think we should acknowledge also he was a slave owner. But you have to distinguish the essential from the accidental. The other thing you have to do is never, ever, ever lump Jefferson together with Jefferson Davis and the people whose statues are coming down. You are doing the America haters' work when you do that. A country that can't tell the difference between pulling down a statue of Jefferson Davis and pulling down a statue of Thomas Jefferson does not deserve a statue of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson Davis was an evil person who wanted to break away from the greatest nation on earth because that nation was trying to get better. The same with Lee and all the other tyrannical, anti-reason, anti-life, anti-happiness, anti-freedom scum that led the Confederacy. These are evil, bad people. It's a blight on our national self-esteem that we've allowed statues to be on public land of them for so long. Those statues were erected for reasons of basically hatred of the principles of America, and trying to co-opt those principles to say that it's okay to have Jim Crow laws, it's okay to celebrate the South. This is an evil thing that these statues were up. It's a thing that went unacknowledged for the country for too long. Its having gone unacknowledged is a sign of the people who were pro-American not having enough national self-esteem to think about, are we acting consistently with our values in flying the Confederate flag over state houses, in having statues of Lee in public square? If you love America, if you're pro-America, if you have American self-esteem, you don't celebrate traitors to the very thing that made the country great. And you want their statues pulled down, not melted down, but put in a museum about how horrible some people once were. And you don't think about that as that's part of my heritage in the South. Like, here's one great thing I inherited, that we once killed a whole bunch of people so that we could keep on owning a whole bunch of people. That's not what we did. That's what some awful people that I'm descended from once did. I want no part of those bastards. What I want a part of is Jefferson, who, for all his faults, did something fantastically world-shapingly great. I want to put a statue up of him and of Frederick Douglass, who's a real American, up in place of this traitor Lee. And so I think it's really important not to get sucked into the tribalism of the left wants to pull down the statues because they don't like Washington or Jefferson Davis, and we need to defend our heritage and therefore need to defend Washington and Jefferson Davis. The problem is that Washington and Jefferson Davis are lumped together, with some people saying our country or our history right or wrong, and other people saying our history sucks right or wrong. It's all wrong, as opposed to saying America's good because of the principles that Washington fought for, that Jefferson articulated in the Declaration of Independence, that Madison embodied into the Constitution, that Lincoln fought to preserve the Union for, that the 14th Amendment incorporated. These are the things that make America great, and the culture that gave rise to these things, and that was further made possible by these things being embedded into law, such that we had an industrial revolution, such that we have a standard of living that was never even envisioned by anyone everywhere else, such that we are able to lead happy, prosperous lives of the type that we can. That's worth celebrating. And part of celebrating that is scorning the people whose life's work were to destroy or fight against that.
Thank you.